One of the most important things that you can do with the spreadsheet is to plot data, to get some type of graph so we can have a graphical representation of our data and we can really look at it. Before we do that though, we're going to need to have a table, and tables are also a very important thing that you can do in spreadsheets. So what I'm going to do in this video is we're just going to talk how to set up some tables. I'm going to do it a couple different ways. In this with Google Sheets, what I'm going to do, let me zoom in a little bit. What I'm going to do is first I'm going to give each column a title. I'm going to give it a name, some type of label. And for this one, I'm just going to call this X, because these are going to be my X values. If these are my X values, then this column here is going to be my Y. But remember, I have a second set of data here, so I'm going to call this Y1. Now, I like to do this especially with Google Sheets, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this table just one large table. And what I can do is I can take this other set of data and I can highlight the whole thing. Remember to highlight, you click on a cell, you hold, and then you go ahead and pull around all the data that you want. Go ahead and lift up once you're happy with that. And if you go ahead and you hover over the edge of this highlighted section, you'll see that you get a little hand here. Go ahead and click and hold, and you'll see that it kind of grabs that. And now I can move my data wherever that I want. So here I could do X and then Y2. This is a little bit redundant here. I don't necessarily need two different tables showing me my X values, them being the same. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually delete this data. And there's a couple ways you can do this. One, you could highlight the data. You could hit delete. We can highlight the data that I want to move, and I can pull this over. I could do that. Another way that I could do it is I can just click on column D. I can right click on column D, and I can say delete the whole column. And if I do that, it deleted the old column D, shifted everything over, and this is now my new column D with my Y2 data into it. So now I have this thing that's starting to look like a table. It's a little messy. It's not really that pretty. And so there are always some things that we can do to make it look a little bit neater. So one thing that I can do is I can highlight all of my data. And there are all these things that I can do. I can make everything look a little smaller. I can change, again, the formats. I can change the font, the size. I can make things bold or italic. We'll talk about borders in a second. We can merge cells. There's a whole lot of stuff that we can do in here, and it might be a good opportunity for you just to kind of play around with some of this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click the one that says horizontal align. And this is going to let you have all your values be to the left, to the center, or to the right. And if we just click center, it's going to snap everything into the center. Maybe this is what you want, maybe it's not. Maybe you want everything aligned vertically, or not vertically, on the left, or maybe you want it on the right. I'm just showing you some things that you can do. Something else that you can do, we've talked about being able to click on a column before, but what I can do is I can actually go between a column. And if I go between a column, you'll see that I have this double arrow. And if I click and hold, it allows me to make my columns wider or more narrow. And so if I don't have a whole lot of data in here, and I want things to be a little bit closer together, I can go ahead and put a little bit closer together. It might make it a little bit more easy to read. I can make the headings bold. I can highlight my whole set of data, and there's a spot up here that has a little grid on it. If you hover over it, it says borders. And so you can click on that, and it's going to allow you to draw different sets of borders into my into my table. And so we can see that it's already starting to look pretty good. And there's a lot of things you can do. There's a whole lot of things that we can do. And this is just the beginning of it. This is just getting things organized. And before we start plotting, sometimes it's nice to be organized so that we know exactly what we're looking at. I'm going to go into Excel really quickly, and we're going to do something somewhat similar. I'm going to zoom in a bit. So that we can look at this again. I'm going to do something a little bit different this time. I'm going to, again, highlight my data, and I'm going to move it. But this time, and sometimes you want to do this. In this case, it doesn't seem like a very good idea, but in some cases, you want to actually have two separate tables. I'm going to actually move this down, this whole thing down a little bit so that I can do a couple extra things. I'm going to, again, make titles. I'm going to call this X1 this time, and then Y1. And we talked about moving our cell down. When we're typing, we hit enter. If I want to move it over to the right, instead of hitting enter, I hit tab, and that will move over to the right. So then I have X2 and Y2. And let's say that this whole thing, this whole column right here, let's say this is information about data A. And I don't really know what data A is. I'm just throwing some stuff out here. And let's say that these two columns are all about data B. All right, so let's look at ways to maybe clean this up a little bit. We can click up here, and we're going to have some things that we can do. For the most part, I'm going to stay in this Home tab. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say, you know what, I want this data A title to actually cover both of these. I don't want it just to be over the X1, I want it to be over the X2 as well. So I highlight where I want data A to kind of cover. And when I go to Home, there's going to be kind of in the middle, find something that says merge and center, or that has a picture similar to this one. It's going to have a big block in the middle with some arrows in it. If I click on that, it's going to merge those two cells together that we had highlighted, and it's going to center my data into it. So now I have one big cell that actually takes up columns B and C here on row 3. And so this incorporates both of these columns. So I'll do that again with column B. Again, I highlight what I want to combine. I click merge and center. And I want these are titles, these are important. I'm going to go ahead and make it a little bit larger so I can change the font size. And I'm going to make them bold as well. Now let's say that I want everything centered again. I can highlight everything. I'm going to go to Home. And here I have all the stuff that I need. I have this spot here that is align left, align right, and center. There's also the one above it, which is how to align it in the cell. We might not use that a whole lot. I'll show you what that does really quick though. Let's say that I made row 3 really, really tall. What I can do is right now, this is saying make sure that everything in there is at the bottom of my cell. If I click the one over here, it puts everything at the top, and everything here goes into the middle. So there's a lot of things we can do to kind of clean this up to make it a little bit neater. I'm going to go ahead and just put it back the way that we had it. I want my X's and Y's to be bold so they stand out a little bit. And again, I can make a border around it. And there are a lot of borders that we can use. going to scroll down, I don't know, about 2/3 of the way, and it says all borders. It means that it's going to put a border everywhere that there is a grid line. And there are also some other things that you can do. I can highlight the whole thing, and I can say I also want to have a thick outside border. And what that does, it makes the border on the outside a little bit thicker. And you can play around with this. You can do all kinds of things. If you really want your table to stand out, you can highlight certain columns, and we could actually make some color changes. I could say that I want everything back here to be yellow. If I do this, I don't like it to be bright colors. I usually do kind of your dim colors and say, all right, there's my yellow and my Y2. Let's say I'm going to be maybe, that's my text. You could change the text color as well. Let's say we could have this one be green. And it's going to make it stand out a little bit. It's going to make it maybe a little bit easier to read. If you do it too much, it might kind of get a little crazy, but it is another way to organize your data and set it up.